Okay, hello everybody. We'll get started in about a minute here. Okay, looks like we're right at time. People are still trickling in, but we can get started with some introductions. Welcome everybody. Welcome back to anyone that's been here before. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Marcella Poloski, and I'm the Business Development Rep here at ERP-One and the host for today's webinar. Before we get into it, I wanted to provide you with a quick background on ERP-One and who we are. We are an ERP solutions provider, and we provide consulting for JDE in technical, application development, and project management. We also provide long-term support via staff augmentation or managed services. Our team has over 20 years of experience working with clients as an extension of their own team, and we pride ourselves on our client-centric approach. Our goal is to help.
So they pick up. But we've had 8 months.
There we go. Our goal is to help customers get the most value of their ERP investment. Today's presentation, Getting Started with Orchestrations, is presented by Nick Wilson and Matt Vanderkooy. Nick is ERP-One's innovation and technology lead and has been with ERP-One for over 15 years. He specializes in project management, digital transformation, architecture design and review, and upgrade planning and execution. Matt is ERP-One's Chief Revenue Officer. He works across the entire organization to align corporate goals with work done by marketing, sales, and delivery teams, ensuring that all ERP-One does is in the service of its existing and future customers. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please drop them in the comment box and we will address them at the end. And if you miss any important points, please note this webinar is being recorded. I will now pass it on to Nick and Matt for the presentation. Thank you and enjoy.
Thanks, Marcella. Nick, if you want to go over to the next slide, we'll get things started here. So when we talk about our webinars and always brainstorming some of the ideas, this one came up a few times. A lot coming out of some of the conversations we had with customers and other JD Edwards users at InFocus, some recent conversations we've had with some of our customers. And this idea of orchestrations, it's still out there. It's been out there for a long time, but it's not one that we have found is universally adopted, where everybody's just like, no, I've got this figured out. We're good. And so we wanted to kick off this webinar, and we'll do a few into next year as well around orchestrations and some of the potential. But really what we're trying to do here and help our customers with and people who are on this webinar is understand how these tools work, right? I think we've probably all heard it, seen it, that they are out there. How do they work and how do we get started? And so that first and foremost is what we want to try to accomplish today. And sort of how we do that, and if you go to the next point, is really around the people in it and what is the right mix of people in our organization that need to be involved in this. I think orchestrations, as we'll see today, really focusing in on process improvement. Well, the biggest impact to that is the daily users of that. And so how do we pull them in to the conversation, but not make them responsible for all of it? Because it is still a development tool at the end of the day. And then lastly, the last point that we want to really come over today is measuring success. Doing all of these things, the development effort, the change management effort, the governance around all of this, how do we ensure that we're doing the right things? And how do we measure all of that? And so these are three real questions that we've heard from customers that they don't have great answers on all of these yet. And so we're hoping the next, half hour, 45 minutes, with some Q&A here, we can really help you all understand, and get a better handle on what some of these are. And so I think if you go to the agenda, I'll just walk through that quick, and then let the smart people in the room really get after this. So we're going to walk you through today, getting started with orchestrations, process improvements, our methodology, things that we've worked on with our customers that have seen success, and then what an implementation would look like. About some specific project deliverables along the way, and then Nick's going to walk us through a case study, a use case, one of many that we've got, but a nice, impactful one that you can see some of the ideas, the art of the possible, or and then I'll come back and finish this off with a summary. So over to you, Nick. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Matt, and a great intro into our presentation today. And so, as Matt mentioned, we are getting started today with orchestrations with these three areas. A way to implement and improve, a way to implement an E1 process improvement solution using the studio as well as modern development features. We will then go through our methodology and then again, implementation phase. So before we get started, as we get started here, where do orchestrations fit into the E1 ecosystem? And so really E1 at its core runs business applications, finance, manufacturing projects, many other modules, 40 years worth of best practices. And so there's a lot of value within those applications. All of those run on top of our E1 servers, which store the data, they run jobs, execute the front end of JD Edwards, and serve up the web servers. And what we're talking about today, sitting in between them, is our digital platform. And what comprises that digital platform is both our classic tool set, so that's the older development approach with OMW and FDA, RDA, as well as orchestrations, workflow, and some of the extensibility framework. So this is the avenue which you as a customer can modify your system to suit your needs. And so, as I mentioned here, this is the orchestrations is where we're going to focus on. But really, it's a tool set that includes orchestrations, notifications, workflow, and extensibility. All of these really are known as UDOs or UDOs. And that's where we're focusing today. And so with that little intro here, I'm going to stop, pause, and launch our first poll, or our only poll. And so the area that we want to really get some interaction and feedback on are what areas are you most interested in implementing orchestrations for? So I'll let you guys answer that one, and then we can continue on our presentation. So we go, I see a few are coming in now. Excellent. Okay, so again, we appreciate and we'll review that at the end there and have a look at the answers. But again, hopefully we will be able to get some of those in context with how we do that at ERP-One and maybe how you can do that at your own organization. So when we focus in on process improvements, we have a few guiding principles. Firstly, we collect data from within E1 and map it to the overall process. Understanding the data is critical to designing an efficient and effective solution. Collecting this data comes in many forms, including configuration of your system, object tracking, implemented features, as well as analysis of your custom modifications. Of course, having process maps and a detailed design of every single step is an ideal scenario, but rarely do most organizations, is this a reality for most organizations. This is where your people, BAs, end users, and developers, as Matt mentioned, the people portion, fill the gap with experience, history of how things used to be done, as well as where they got to and how they got to the existing state that it's in now. From there, we create a solutions backlog. This is a list of all great ideas of process improvements that go along with or potentially can be solved by some of these modern development tools that we've got at our disposal. This solutions backlog will, this solutions backlog will be tagged with business value, along with some estimated development spend, which really everything comes back to ROI. And with the modern development toolkit from Oracle, we can start to see some tangible benefits for these projects. Now that we've got our marching orders, i.e. our solution figured out and in place, it's time for the rubber to hit the road and we can start developing. Remembering that these solutions will have a much shorter life cycle, a development life cycle, which is measured in days and weeks, not necessarily months or quarters. Finally, the piece that's probably most critical is measuring, least emphasized, is measuring and examining the results. Did we solve the problem that we intended to solve? And so that brings us to our methodology. What are the things that we do with customers to help facilitate these solutions? And we do that in a few different ways. Like J.D. Edwards, we've got a flexible and multifaceted approach that depends on the needs and scenario of the customer. We have again a three-pronged approach that can either work dependently, independently, or in conjunction. So the first part is when again we're focusing on people today, and it's just that our people or the people and processes. Understanding the pain points facilitated by conversation and discussion is usually an appropriate task or tact that we use. We focus on this approach more in the next few slides. Moving on, there is also, we have other tools at our disposal which aid in the understanding of the customer process. They are data and system oriented, which give us an unbiased view of what is happening on the system. These tools include configuration analysis, UDCs, business module constants, scheduled jobs, menus, versions, and all sorts of other things that we can extract to start to piece together, what is the process? And then we can start to answer the question of how can we make it better? Where are the pain points? Using these tools gives us that understanding, but more analysis is definitely required and to map against the customer process. Finally, the third tool in our toolkit is enterprise automation. This is the latest feature from Oracle, and although it sounds a little bit misnamed, this concept, enterprise automation, combines new tools and features which both leverage the E1 data that Oracle's calling your digital gold, and then it aids in process improvements. How it does that is by mapping standard process plus your business process to things like user or activity rules that are built into your system. The second and the third option here are a little bit more detailed and ones that we're not going to dive into today, but we're going to more so focus on our people and processes methodology. So with that in mind, we have three basic steps, which the first of is education. And so when we are asked to do a discovery or uncover what processes can we fix with orchestrations, which is a common question, we usually fall back to this approach here. So from the education perspective, we look at what kinds of processes lend themselves well to orchestration. And what we do is educate customers on just that. What design elements do orchestrations have? And understanding what those design elements are help uncover, okay, what is the art of the possible? We then move into demonstrating 3+ orchestrations that are applicable to a wide range of customer clients. And so, again, trying to show more of the art of the possible, giving some seed type of information, and then, of course, with the customer assigning some homework. And so this approach we facilitate with the customer in terms of end users, BAs, or the IT department. It doesn't matter. We tailor the approach to fit the right audience. But the end result is the same, which is that we try to educate and inform everybody that will be used to include in the process in order to come up with some of these good ideas. And so that's just that is the second phase here, the ideation phase. Within that, we will take up our homework. So if we have tasked people to, go and look now that you know what's happening with the new features, what areas of your business are most aligned with improvements that we could implement? We will dig deep into the existing processes and specifically their pain points. What makes it difficult to achieve today? And how can we fix that now that we've got this modern development toolkit? We should be able to develop new solutions easily. And so the results can be more easily obtained. We brainstorm ideas, possible designs for orchestrations, as well as considering all inputs. And that includes JDE features, design options, and other components. Finally, during this phase, ideation, we will align all ideas and objectives and ensure that the whole, the SMEs, BAs, whomever is part of the project, understands each of the ideas and really what we're trying to solve. From there comes the creation or the development phase. We will define, our consultants will be able to evaluate the processes moving forward. Evaluate. It will involve evaluating each solution and looking at specific business value and then calculating the ROI. And so we may have a business solution that really will not yield any true business value, i.e. will make something easier for somebody to do, but the actual outcome isn't really worth the amount of development or investment that's involved. That's where, again, the modern development framework comes in handy here because of the shorter development life cycles. We can really achieve value more easily, and the solutions we can apply don't have to be nearly as large. And so again, this business value comes really with the recommendation as part of this phase, and includes an initial assessment, as I mentioned, the estimate of cost to operate or to orchestrate, the savings that would possibly happen, and then the ROI or break-even point. From there, it's time for the rubber to hit the road and us to start developing. So with that is a great segue into our implementation phase. To understand what a project looks like, we look at a basic approach, a basic design to each of these projects. During discovery, we go through and perform the steps in our methodology, i.e. collecting the data, producing solutions, calculating ROI, defining priority, and that work is completed up front, but does not need to stop there. Right? That discovery can be an iterative cycle, and in fact, one that we promote and would encourage in terms of continuous improvement, trying to improve the processes all the time. Once that's done, we've got two options. So a big bang approach where we list all of our solutions at once and then start developing away, or we can implement a phased approach here. And we found that keeping these solutions small, using this phased approach allows businesses to more easily bite off these projects applying, it also allows a much easier way of applying business value to each one and going through some of that business case type of process where we need to evaluate the inputs, evaluate the expected outputs, and then measuring, have we succeeded? This, again, we've seen has a higher degree of success and a lower time and cost commitment for each customer and project. Layering in now our deliverables for each of these phases so that you can get a sense of what it is that a project would look like. It really is two discrete sets of engagements. The first one is the discovery phase that I've spoken about a lot. And again, how we extract that information from you, the customer, and the systems. And secondly, what happens during the implementation phase. The discovery phase will yield essentially all of the data that we extract from the discovery. So the tables, workshop summaries, the different meetings and notes, as well as the features presentation, all of that is very important, or sorry, all of that is presented to the customer at the end of discovery. And most importantly, it's the summary of solutions that could be implemented. So those are all of the great ideas that come out of that discovery is the real meat of the implementation phase. And so during that phase, we will dive into the detailed design documentation of each solution, updates to the backlog as they're uncovered, testing, documentation, and then the actual development using the modern tool set. And so whether you will be using ERP-One, ERP-One's amazing technical and functional team, or if you're implementing with your own amazing technical and functional team, or a combination of both, following this high-level gateways and steps will ensure success for all of these initiatives. And so the discovery will give us I apologize. So the different steps here are, the discovery phase will give us all of the information we've just talked about and the backlog, but the detailed design steps happen afterwards, as I mentioned. They feed into the development of the UDO or the orchestrations or UDO lifecycle, testing and implementing into production. Since we're focusing on process changes, there is, of course, some change management, and ensuring buy-in from all customers is definitely key. If done correctly in the first part, it shouldn't be that big of a problem, not just from an adoption standpoint, but also it includes different scenarios like updating training, documentation, job aids, how-tos, as well as actual process documentation if affected. And so when we talk about implementation, we also need to include governance and the development lifecycle. Orchestrations, UDOs, extensibility, and workflow are all amazing tools and much easier to use than their predecessors. But at the end of the day, effectively, they change production. And so they need to be managed. The good news is that the modern development objects can flow through the existing environment architecture that's built into JD Edwards, which is pretty good. The better news is that using those same tools, the modern development ones, we can simplify and automate many of the tasks that you're probably already used to, potentially with the classic tool set. So here is a basic scenario. Using the traditional roles, developer, tester, and user, but keep in mind that this role developer can be achieved by a resource who is not a traditional developer, but rather a BA or a SME. We aren't writing lines of code, but rather developing with the new tools quickly and efficiently. The developer will make their changes in production, or sorry, in the development environment. Apologies, that's a Freudian slip. And they will signal that something is ready to be tested. Objects are promoted into PY using notifications sent to the right resources, and understanding that something needs to be tested. Once they have been tested, objects are then promoted into the prototype environment where notifications are sent to appropriate resources, not just for testing or promotion, but to understand if the testing has been completed. The tester can either document a defect or they can return the objects for rework. This again is a normal life cycle. It then gets promoted to production. So once all of these objects are there in production, security also needs to be applied. This type of system can be tailored, just like JD Edwards, to each of the customer's requirements, whether it be automated notifications or workflow approval. You can use the new features to tailor what your change management system looks like. So now comes the good part of the presentation, or the better part, I'd say, which is our use case. So again, this is the art of the possible, and definitely in interest of time, I will go through each, not all of these ones here, but these are the three high-level areas that we really see a lot of orchestration development work happening in using the new tools. So with integration, digital transformation, and customization. What we're going to focus on with our use case is a process change that we implemented that changes obviously the business process, which is a customization, as well as eliminating some manual steps of a process. So our use case here is a customer is creating business units which are very complicated for them to achieve. And they have the following challenges. So when creating business units within this customer, all of the information was handled by Excel, and then the data keyed into JD Edwards afterwards by a clerk. They have approximately 150 business units created per year, and required two different resources. Part of the challenge is that the customer had both World and Enterprise-One, which had a lot of crossover between both the finance areas, between the finance chart of accounts and of World and E1. And they had a lot of custom processes to align those chart of accounts, and it was difficult for them to achieve. And so looking at the existing process, it looked something like this, where the customer had one finance person that would do and calculate all of the data that they needed and get it into Excel. From there, they would then pass it off to a clerk somewhere else to enter all of these steps that we can see here. With orchestrations, we were able to streamline these steps by using JD Edwards, obviously, and process recorder, plus some orchestration development, as well as an Excel plugin. That finance person who, that's where their job was definitely to align and associate the correct chart of accounts so that when the year end would come around, things would be properly allocated. But we would then remove all of these JD Edwards tasks by the data entry clerk. And so what that looks like here is all of these steps that the end user would do for just step one. So within that first part, creating a business unit, they needed to do all of these screens. From there, we created an orchestration that followed those same steps and did it for them. Similarly, when creating an address book record, we had many steps to create an address book record, and we created a separate orchestration for that component. We had a cross-reference, as I mentioned, which was their custom. So this isn't a standard procedure, but it was some custom logic that would be able to be applied by that finance person. We orchestrated that component as well as what was called a crosswalk. So aligning the accounts. And again, this was more of a custom procedure. Finally, but after they would do those cross references, they could create the actual chart of accounts in JD Edwards, and then they would be able to update the business unit with the right address book number. And so we can see that from an input on the manual data entry side, it looked something like this, where all of this information needed to be output from Excel, printed, and then, somebody would have to run down the hall and they would key that in. And rather than printing that Excel, the finance person, once everything was completed, they would be able to organize the data in their Excel, and then using that plugin I referenced, click a go button, and then it would update and create that business unit and all of those steps without the need for that data entry clerk. And so we go from the business challenges to business results, which are, the orchestration runtime went from 2 minutes each. Sorry, the orchestration runtime would take around 2 minutes as opposed to the other method, which was, I can't remember, 30 minutes or 5 minutes. And then we brought it down to 5 hours per year from 50 hours per year. And so when looking again at these metrics, we could see that we were achieving, those results at the beginning. We reduced the double entry in Excel and E1 and improved efficiency as well as simplifying a complex process. And so with that, I will hand it back over to Matt as well as for some questions, if there are any.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Well, we had a couple questions sort of teed up and time for that. Thought I would just recap real quick here. As we go, as we've seen here, some of these features are new, some are old, and yet not a lot of people have fully wrapped their hands around it. And this is the place where Oracle and JD Edwards have made a lot of investment. And quite frankly, keeping up with some of these features can be difficult. And so really here, trying to help you understand what those features are. And that's part of a bit of that workshop idea that Nick talked about as well. I think another key point that we brought up here, it's the collaboration. Tech team, developers, users of the system. That's how you're going to get the best bang for your buck solutions out of all of this. And also understanding why you're doing it, what's the business value, what's the ROI, and that you can actually measure results. As Nick was just showing on the last slide there, the amount of time that it would take from a manual entry perspective versus doing it all through the orchestration was one cost savings, but also the accuracy of it would be another business value and benefit that we could have here. And this isn't anything that should be handled differently than other development or other security. This is still code that's getting promoted into your production environment and going to be used by end users. And so having that consideration around and governance around all of the things that you do with orchestrations and other modern development is going to be really critical in this as well. So Marcella, I'm not sure if any questions have come in, but I know you've been watching that. If there are any, then fire it off to Nick and I.
No, it looks like we're good. And in the interest of time, I think we're going to wrap it up. So thank you, Matt and Nick, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I will be sending out a recording of the webinar in case you missed anything or want to review it. And I will be sending a post-webinar survey as well. We are sending out Starbucks gift cards for anybody that fills those out. And please keep an eye out for our next webinar, Package Build Automation, coming up on December 5th. And as always, please check us out on LinkedIn. We're always sharing helpful tips and blog posts. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.